under your wings and cover me within your mighty hand. And when the oceans rise and thunders roar, I will soar with you above the storm. And Father, you are King over the flood, and I will be still and know you are God. Find rest in my soul in Christ alone, and know His power in quietness and trust. When the oceans rise and thunders roar, I will soar with you above the storm. Father, you are King over the flood, and I will be still and know you are God. You are God. Find rest, my soul, in Christ alone, and know His power in quietness and trust. When the oceans rise and thunders roar, I will soar with you above the storm. Father, you are King over the flood, and I will be still and know you are God.
Good to be back again to share the word of God with you and to let you know that God is still alive and well. Yes, because at times situations make us feel as though, and even make people behave as though he's not alive. But I'm glad that I know he's still alive. And tonight we're here again to give him thanks, to bless his name, and to look into his word and to learn something more about him. Because tonight we want to learn about the God we serve. We want to learn about him, want to know him, want to get close to him. And the only way you can get close to God is if you know him. The more you know of him is the more you get and want to get close to him. It is in times like this that you learn about the very things that are important in life and in your life and walk with him as your savior. It's important that you do not take time out of your busy schedule, out of your life, to waste it doing things that are not going to amount to anything. Sometimes we get ourselves all caught up into things that it will not amount to anything. But I can guarantee you this one thing, that your time spent with God are never wasted. There are times that you will look back and say, boy, I'm glad I spent that time with God. Because you're going to come upon situations where you're going to find that only because of your knowledge of him, you were able to get through. Only because of your relationship with him, you were able to get through. And I want you to have that relationship with God so much intertwined into you and into what you do, that everything you do emanates from him. Everything you say is a word from his heart. That's how much I want you to get wrapped up in God. But you can't do that if you don't know him. So tonight we're going to get into his word. We're going to learn some more about him and about who God is. And in specifics, we're going to be looking at the Holy Spirit, and we're going to look at him in the life of the believer. We continue to look at the Holy Spirit in the life of the believer, and we will look specifically at this aspect of sanctification. So we're going to be looking at the Spirit's work in sanctification, or the Spirit's role in the work of sanctification. So we're going to continue that look tonight. Last 2 weeks I've been looking at sanctification and looking into what sanctification is and the means of sanctification. And so we go tonight to look at the Spirit in the work of sanctification and what's his role, how he works in sanctification. So that's what I'll be looking at tonight. And before we get into the word, I want to first to just be the word of prayer to God. We want to pray and ask God's guidance and his wisdom as we get into his word, that he will bring forth his rhema to our hearts, that we can face our challenges, knowing full well that what God wants of us and what we're supposed to be doing. Let's pray. Father, I want to thank you tonight for your goodness, your love, your mercies. I want to thank you, O God, for your peace that passes all understanding. I want to thank you, O God, that you have never left us alone, but you're always with us. You carry us through every storm, every fire. You said the flames will not burn us. You said that the water will not overflow us. And God, that's all our experience have been. We want to say thanks. Thank you, God, for your favor. Tonight, as we come before your presence, we ask you, God, for your guidance, for your direction as we go into your words. Open up the minds of our understanding, that we'll understand your words, oh God, as you break it to us. And that, God, as we hear your words, it will be deposited in hearts already prepared to receive your word. And as we receive your word, Father, may your Holy Spirit take that word and minister it to our lives as we give you thanks and praise. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. Bless the Lord. So tonight we'll be looking into the word of God. And as I said specifically, in the work of the Holy Spirit in sanctification, or the Spirit in the believer and the Spirit in the work of sanctification. So that's all we'll be looking tonight. That's what we're looking at tonight. And I would love for us to follow through in the word, in the Bible, and also follow as we go along. Last week we were looking at the means of sanctification. We talked about the week before the meaning of sanctification, and I would hope that we all have a good understanding as to what sanctification means, what it is, and also how sanctification works. Now, I want to establish from this point on that sanctification, as we talk about it, I established to you that sanctification at the time of us receiving Jesus Christ into our hearts as our personal Lord and Savior, at the point of the new birth, of regeneration, of us being set free from sin, that point where we get saved from our sins. It is at that point that we are sanctified, we are set apart by God. We are set apart by Him to be a people. And it's no coincidence that the word church and the Greek word for church, it means the called out one. I mean, because that's in essence what God has built for Himself, a set apart people, a called out people, people called out from among those that they were a part of. And so I want us to get to that point where we are able to really understand that we are the called out one, we're the set apart one, we're the one set apart for God's use and for God's glory. Amen. So I want us to get to that point where we understand that, we will live that, and everything that we do becomes an outflow of God in us. Amen. So let's continue with that look on the Holy Spirit tonight. So we'll be looking at this portion of our study on the work of sanctification and the Spirit in the work of sanctification. Specifically tonight, we're going to be looking at the role of the Spirit in the work of sanctification. All right. So we're looking at the role of the Spirit. All right. So let's get going. All right. The role of the Spirit in the work of sanctification. Let's talk about the role of the Spirit. What is the Spirit's role in sanctification? Well, we have already established that the Spirit is the one who works in the whole aspect work of regeneration, where we get saved, where we are reunited with God, when we establish that relationship with God, and we become God's son, God's child again. And so we have to understand that it's the Spirit who does that. We can't save ourselves. So when you looked at the Spirit in the work of conversion, we had looked at it and we have said that it is the Spirit who brings about our conversion. It is not our good deeds, it's not our good studies, it's not our good desires, it's not us who sought after God and found Him. It is the fact that the Spirit of God takes us and converts us. The work of conversion is His work. He's the one who convicts you of sin, and He's the one who places within you the new nature that you now turn away from sin. All right, so we have already established that that's His role. So as we look further, we are looking now at the second aspect of sanctification, not the initial sanctification where you are sanctified. You are sanctified. You are set apart for God's use. We are looking at now the part where you're now actually doing that work of sanctification. In other words, I like to explain it this way. When you are saved, you are sanctified, set apart for God. In other words, you are set apart as holy. Now, because you're living in time, you are now still living on the earth. You are supposed to now manifest what you are on the earth. So because you're sanctified, you are now supposed to be living as a sanctified individual. So your life is supposed to manifest sanctification. Your life is supposed to be manifesting that sanctifiedness, if I can use that word, or holiness rather. We can use holiness. Your life must be holy. What you do must be holy. How you walk must be holy. How you live must be holy. How you treat people must be a manifestation of that holiness. And so it's that aspect of sanctification that we're looking at. And we're looking now at the role of the Spirit in that aspect of sanctification, where we are actually living holiness. All right? Now, all right, here it comes. The new birth is the only sanctification crisis in the New Testament. And that is seen in 1 Corinthians 6 verse 11 and 1 Peter 1 verse 2. Those two scriptures refer to this work of sanctification where an individual is sanctified. Let's look at those texts. In 1 Corinthians 6 verse 11, it says, "And such were some of you, but ye are washed, but ye are sanctified, but ye are justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the Spirit of our God." Here, the text talks about the fact that we are sanctified. Now, there's a distinction between these two words, because the word translated sanctified in the Old Testament, we looked at that word Kadesh. Now, that word is only translated sanctified. It's not translated holy, because that's a verb. And the verb is you actually doing the act, separating something for God's use, separating something for a specific use. It's identified as separated from any other use, but for one specific use and no other uses whatsoever. So that's something being sanctified, set apart for a specific and particular use. And then we looked at the word Kodesh, which Kodesh is the one that is translated holy. And that is the noun. That noun refers to the thing, person, or place that is sanctified. All right? So that's what holiness is. Something, someone, or a place that is set apart. So sanctified is actually the act of sanctifying something, the act of separating something, the act of setting something aside. That is what sanctified means. All right? So here, Corinthians 6:11, 1 Corinthians 6:11 is telling us that we are washed, and we are sanctified, we are justified. No, the terminology is used here. Paul didn't say that you will be or you have been. He says you are. So that speaks to your status, what you are, a state of being. You are sanctified, all right? Now, 1 Peter 1 verse 2 says, elect according to the foreknowledge of God, the Father, through sanctification of the Spirit, unto obedience and sprinkling of the blood of Jesus Christ, grace unto you and peace be multiplied. That is Peter in his salutation, in writing his letter. All right, so here, the fruit of the Spirit is what we're going to be looking at now, because the role of the Spirit in actuality, his role in sanctification is best understood in terms of the fruit of the Spirit. So we're going to understand the role of the Holy Spirit in sanctification. We best understand that through understanding the fruit of the Spirit, because that is how the Spirit of God really works in us for us to be sanctified or to live sanctified. All right, so it's best understood in that light. Galatians 5 verse 22 to 23 is where we find a listing of the fruits of the Spirit. Now, you would expect, because of it's a list, you'd expect that the word fruit should be fruits and not a singular fruit. And that must raise a question. It says the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. Now, as Paul is saying, the fruit that the Holy Spirit produces within you is manifested in these different forms that he just listed. So it's not each of these identified as a fruit of the Spirit. But the fruit of the Spirit is simply saying the produce of the Spirit, what the Spirit produces in our life, brings about a manifestation of these different traits in us. All right, so it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. There's no law against these. All right, but let's look at them as we go on. All right, the kind of fruit a tree produces is dependent on the kind of tree it is. Its nature, right? It depends on the kind of tree it is. It's nature. That's what determines the kind of fruit that a tree produces. Now think of a mango tree. Why is it that a mango tree produces mango? You would answer me by saying because it's a mango tree. And that's true, because it's a mango tree. And you call it a mango tree because it produces mango. But the reason why that mango tree produces mango is because of the nature of that plant. It's because of the kind of plant it is. This kind of plant produces what we call mango. In other words, you'll never see this fruit we call mango on any other plant that does not have the characteristics of this particular plant tree. So it's because of the nature of the plant why it produces mango. So no other plant with a different nature will produce mango. So we have to understand then that it is through our new birth we become partakers of the divine nature, right? Through our new birth we become partakers of the divine nature. And so we should produce fruits in keeping with that nature, because it's the nature of a thing that determines the fruit it produces. It's the nature of a thing that determines the fruit it produces. So if we have the nature of God in us, then the fruit we should produce is a fruit that is in keeping with that nature. The old man, yeah, you have to talk about him, right? Because you can't talk about the new man without, acknowledging that you had an old man. So the old man, which is what we were before we became a Christian, before Christ came into us, before we were redeemed, right, from sin. The old man produces fruits in keeping with the old nature. But we are a new creature, so we produce fruits of our new nature. All right, so the new nature we have, and who gives us that new nature? It's the Holy Spirit that places that new nature within us. All right, so it is Him who produced that new nature in us. In 2 Corinthians 5 verse 7, I don't know why I have 1 Corinthians there. My apologies there. It's supposed to be 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. That scripture text tells us that we have a new nature and that the old nature is passed away, and everything about us and in us has been made new, has become new. We're a new creature. Now, it didn't say that you are a new person. It says you're a new creature. In other words, what you were before, you are a very different creature from that. Nothing about your old man remains in you when you are born again. Understand? As a new creature, the old man has passed away with all his deeds, dies, and now you are a new creature. Now, the quickest similarities I can find here to exemplify this is the caterpillar and the butterfly. See, the caterpillar is a creature, and the butterfly is a different creature. Now, the caterpillar lives a stark different life from that of a butterfly. Right? So the caterpillar, he crawls about on tree leaves, and he eats the tree leaves. The butterfly, on the other hand, flies about, feeds on nectars and stuff like that. Now, the caterpillar is the one who transformed itself and becomes a new creature, a butterfly. So it wraps itself in a cocoon for several days, and as it's in that cocoon, it changes its form, it changes its nature, it changes everything about itself. It goes through a process of change, and when it comes out, it no longer crawls, it flies. New creature. So that the caterpillar comes out of that cocoon a new creature. That's like us when we get saved, when we come to know Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. We come out as a new creature, a new way of life, a new way of living. That's what happens at the new birth. So at the new birth, the Holy Spirit plants in each believer the seed of the divine nature. As that seed is fed and watered by the word of God, that seed grows and matures into a beautiful fruit as the nature of Christ is seen increasingly in our lives. That is the fruit of the Spirit. As we become more like Christ, that is the fruit of the Spirit, which makes us more like Him. So as 1 Corinthians tells us, or rather 2 Corinthians, forgive that typographical error, 2 Corinthians 5:17, that you're a new creature. In other words, there is nothing about your old nature that you should be embracing. Everything about you must now be new. That's why Paul says, crucify, mortify therefore the deeds of the flesh. Kill it. So Paul is asking us to get rid of the old man with his deeds and live by the Spirit, which bears a particular kind of fruit. You see, the flesh will always bear its kind of fruit, but the Spirit will always bear its kind of fruit as well. Now, we want to look at each of these fruit of the Spirit, not in detail, but just basically to mention them so that at least you have an understanding as to what they are. The first one given in Galatians chapter 5 verse 22 is love. Fruit of the Spirit is love. Now that word love is the Greek word agape. Now agape is the same word in 1 Corinthians 13 that is translated charity. Same word. Now, is it that Paul is saying that charity is a fruit of the Spirit? Of course it is. It is a fruit of the Spirit. The ability or the act of caring for those who are less fortunate than yourself is a fruit of the Spirit. So if someone has an attitude where they refuse to help those who are less fortunate than themselves, no matter the reason, you might want to identify the person and say, well, that person used to live a life as a rich person, squander their money, and look where they are now. That may prevent you from coming to their aid. But the spirit of love and the fruit of the Spirit which produces love, that fruit dictates that regardless of the reason why the person is there, as long as you have the Spirit of God in you, it is going to produce that love inside of you that reaches out and touches those that are less fortunate than yourself. It's going to touch their life. In other words, you're going to be someone who reach out and care for others. A custom or an explanation given in the tradition of the Jewish people. You know, the Bible says you should love your neighbor as yourself. But there's an understanding that is depicted in Jewish tradition that the greatest, the only love you're capable of is the love of self. And that explanation dictates that yourself is the only love you really can actually express. And so when they talk about charity, they say that what they're actually saying is that you project yourself onto the other person. In other words, when you look at the other person, you see yourself. And so as you look at the person, you see yourself, and you reach out to help the person, it is you helping yourself. It is you seeing yourself in that person, a reflection of yourself. And so you reach out to do for that person what you would have done for yourself or would have wanted someone to do for you if you were in that situation. So in other words, the greatest expression of love is to project yourself onto the other person and reach out to really bless that person. In other words, the tradition holds, or the explanation holds, that the truest expression of love is love for self. And so unless you're able to empathize and project yourself onto the other person, you will not be able to truly express love. And this is what that explanation entails in the tradition of the Jewish people. So love here is really driving at the whole aspect of you loving others. The person who hurt you, loving him. The person who stabbed you in the back, loving that person. Not because the person never hurt you. Not because the person did something good to you. Not because the person is someone you like. You are reaching out in love to that person simply because you love them. Because you have projected yourself onto them. When you see a person, a homeless person on the street, can you see yourself in that person? Can you see yourself in that person's eyes? Can you see yourself in the condition that person is enduring? Do you see yourself in that? Because that is what true expression of love is. Seeing yourself in the eyes of that person, in the situation of that person. Because if you were in that position, what would you want? If you were in that situation, what would you want? And that is how unconditional love is truly expressed. That's how it's truly expressed when you're able to project yourself onto that person. Joy. Now, this is one that many Christians need to embrace. The Spirit of God produces joy in the believer. You talk about joy, what are you talking about? It's the all acts of excitement, joy, jubilation. you are enthusiastic. Now, do you go about doing your daily chores enthusiastically? Or you go about moping, oh God, when this I go done? Do you go about performing your task for God with enthusiasm? Or do you go about it with a sort of a donkey face? The story of the little girl and her aunt, whom she was simply, she concluded that the donkey was a Christian. And she was asked why. And she said, because that's how my auntie looks. She's a Christian, so the donkey must be a Christian. So, in essence, what I'm saying is, when you assess a lot of believers, if you should do a survey of the believers in the church, maybe you'll be surprised at the amount of persons who have a donkey face, particularly when they come to church. It's a donkey face. They don't come to church with enthusiasm. They don't come to church with that sense of excitement that I'm going to glorify my God. And when they help somebody, it's not a sense of enthusiasm. It's done with a sense of, oh, should I have done that? And they beat up on themselves. I really didn't want that money, but why? Maybe God will bless me back. I just do it because, I felt compelled, but I really needed that money. Sometimes we'll find out if we get some more money now. And maybe that's how we beat up on ourselves. But when you give to others, when you give, the Bible says God loves a cheerful giver. The joy that the Spirit produces is joy that is unfettered. Limitless joy. Joy that finds you enthusiastic in doing the thing that the Word of God asks you to do. In meeting the needs of others. In meeting with others in church. You find enthusiasm about that. You are enthusiastic. One of the traits that is given as a trait of success, it is said that if you're going to be successful, you have to be someone who has an unfettered amount of enthusiasm. Enthusiasm. And that's what joy brings. Let's talk about peace. Oh, a fruit of the Spirit is peace. Now, here's an example of this peace. When Jesus was traveling with his disciples across the Sea of Galilee, he was going across the sea with his disciples. The Bible says in the middle of the night, Jesus was asleep in the stern of the boat. What you'd call the bow. In front of the boat. And let me do it that way because I don't want to confuse you. In the front of the boat, he was there sleeping. You and I know that when the waves in the sea become boisterous on the sea, especially in the deeper part of the sea, when those waves become boisterous, the front of the boat gets the most worked because it's going up and down. And he was in the front of the boat sleeping. And there was a storm raging. The storm was so bad that the disciples thought they were going to die. The storm was so raging so much that they thought this was their last day. And so they went and woke him up. Master, Master, don't you care whether or not we live? Carest not thou that we perish? We are dying and you are sleeping? Jesus had to say, wow, you have little faith, man. Oh, you have little faith. And he spoke to the winds and the storms, and the wind obeyed him. The wind and the waves, they obeyed him. They calmed down. Total calm. That's the peace that the Spirit brings. A peace of mind, a peace of heart, a peace that causes you, when everything around you is raging, you are able to sleep. When all hell is breaking loose around you, you are able to relax and sleep. It's like the story that we shared. That man in the storm was sitting down calm and contented while his wife was worrying and raging about how things are bad and doesn't he care. And his explanation is one we must always hold on to. He says, God, the storm is in God's hand. Therefore, I have nothing to worry about. Do you realize that everything that happens around you, everything that is happening is in God's hands? Is in his hands. Remember that passage you read in Isaiah chapter 54, where God literally said to Israel, to Judah, He said, the smith that forms and shapes the sword. He says, I created the smith. God gave him the wisdom to make the weapon he makes. And if that didn't satisfy you, he says, I am the one who formed and who created the smith. And if that doesn't satisfy, he says, no weapon formed. So he created a smith who formed the weapons. And then he turns around and says, look here, man, none of the weapon that smith is forming will prosper against you. None will be successful. Every weapon formed against you will never be successful. That kind of knowledge should give you the peace of mind that the Spirit brings. If you have no peace, I think you need to check yourself, you know. If you are worried every day about what's happening around you, you need to do a check, do a self-check. See if you're really living by the Spirit or you're living by the flesh. You're going to live by one. Long suffering. One that is not really one that we love. But long suffering simply is the ability to suffer for long. The ability to suffer for long. When I see this word, I remember the words of Habakkuk. When Habakkuk says in his book, he says, rejoice not over me, O mine enemies. When I fall, he says, though when I fall, I shall arise. Though I sin darkness, the Lord shall be my light. Oh, that's Malachi. I think that's Malachi. Habakkuk says, though the fig tree failed to blossom. Right, that's the one. In Habakkuk chapter 3, he says, though the fig tree failed to blossom, and no fruit be on the vine, though the fields yield no fruit, I will praise you, Lord divine. Yet will I praise you, even in the night, even in the midst of the storm, I'm going to praise my God. Habakkuk penned those words and he sang those words because he was saying, it doesn't matter what I'm going through, it doesn't matter what I'm enduring, I am going to praise God. Though the fig tree failed to blossom, that's food, and no fruit be on the vine, that's still food, but that's also money. The man is saying, though the source of my income will dry up and is not producing, I will still praise God. He says, I joy in the God of my salvation. But in Malachi, where it says, in Micah, sorry, not Malachi, Micah chapter 6, where it's in verse 8, where it says, do not rejoice for me, O mine enemies, though I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be my light. He says, I will bear the indignation of the Lord until he please my cause and executes righteousness on my behalf. You see, that prophet was saying, I will bear the indignation of the Lord. That's long suffering. Now he's saying that God is angry, but I will bear it until he please my cause. How many of us can say, I will bear what God is putting me through until God decides that I've had enough? That's what long suffering is. If God says you're going to bear it for 2 years, thank you, Lord. 2 months, thank you, Lord. 38 years, thank you, Lord. And you start wondering. You start to wonder now when I was 38 years, right? Why would you want to endure something for 38 years? Well, you remember the man that was born blind when Jesus was walking this earth? The Bible says he was born blind. There was also one that was crippled for 38 years. Now, that man that was born blind, I assume he was way over 30. Because he's a man, not a boy. Bible didn't call him a boy. So he knows he's way over 30. I always say that he's about 40 years of age. The man was born blind. And when the disciples saw him, they asked Jesus, after Jesus healed him, they asked Jesus, why was he born blind? Was it the sin of his parents or was it his sin? Jesus says, none of the above. He was born blind just so that today you will see the work of God manifested in him. That sounds a bit crazy. God let a man born blind so that on that particular day, Jesus could heal him. The only reason he was born blind is so that Christ could heal him on that day, that particular day. How many of us will endure such life and hardship just so that God can get glory from our lives? Just so that the glory of God will be made manifest in us. That's long suffering. You endure it, you suffer long. There are some persons who talk about stop suffering. But I'm not talking about suffering as an unbeliever and suffering as somebody who don't know God. I am talking about suffering for the gospel's sake. I'm talking about the test you go through, the things you have to endure, sometimes the quality of life you have to live simply because you are holding your banner high. The Lord God Almighty is my deliverer. Can you hold that banner high while you're enduring hardship? Can you sing and say, my God is a consuming fire, even though you're under pressure and have so many issues in your life to be sorted out? Can you sing the song and say, my God is a provider when your cupboard is empty? Can you sing, God is my provider when you don't have a source of income? Can you sing and say, God is my deliverer when you're going through your difficulties? That's the time you need to sing those praises to God and endure hardship as a good soldier. Gentleness. And this word gentleness, the Greek word also means kindness. To be kind to someone. Yes. Kindness. To be gentle. Are we kind to each other? Now, one of the ways to assess this, is to look at the words we say to each other. How we talk to each other. Sometimes the way we speak with each other is not kind at all. Sometimes we speak so harsh towards each other. We have to really wonder if we really understand what we're doing. We must learn to be kind toward each other and speak kindly. Speak kindly. Even if the other person hurt you, speak kindly. Kindly. Paul says, be kindly affection one to another. Goodness. Whoa. Goodness is a fruit of the Spirit, yeah? In other words, are you being good to others? Are you practicing goodness? Are you being good towards others? The word simply means goodness. And you know what goodness is, to be good. All right? Faith. Faith is a fruit of the Spirit. And remember, faith is the opposite of fear. So faith is the opposite of fear. And I'd love for you to hold on to this truth, friends, because what you are fearful of brings what you're fearful of into your reality. So fear brings it too. But faith also brings what you have faith for into your reality. It makes real what you're believing for. Fear also makes real what you're afraid of. There stands opposed. So one is negative and one is positive. So fear is negative. Faith is positive. So the things that you are fearful of, be careful. Don't allow it to come into your life. Faith is a fruit of the Spirit. So if you have the Spirit within you, that will aid you in developing faith by having the Spirit within and by living according to the Spirit. Living by his dictates. Meekness. Meekness. The meekest of all men is who? Moses. The Bible says he was the meekest of all. However, this word meekness, it speaks not just to being meek. Yeah, you know what meek is? It's really, in essence, it is being humble. Humble. Meekness, humility. Humility is a fruit of the Spirit. Pride is the opposite of humility. Anybody who is prideful, check yourself. You see, sometimes people refer to pride as confidence. And yes, you can, I mean, in a sense, pride is confidence. It is self-confidence. And you need to have self-confidence. But Paul says, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. That's when it steps out of the zone. Don't step out of the zone. So sometimes people are prideful and call it self-confidence. When it's not really self-confidence, it's far more than self-confidence. They are prideful. Certain things they don't want to be said about them. And so they live a particular way in public and another way in private. Because They do not want certain perception to be out there about them. Now, friends, can't we be truly who we really are? If you are a believer and you have the Spirit of God inside of you, you don't have two lives. As a young Christian, I remember one of the things we used to talk about is my Christian life. And I never used to like it. I did not like it. This thing about Christian life. I don't have a Christian life. And the thing is, they used to say, my Christian life and my secular life. I used to hate the concept because your secular life or your Christian life. You know what secular means? Secular means unholy. So you're saying my holy life and my unholy life. Where do those two come together? It means that people, you see, we're compartmentalizing the whole issue of Christianity, where you live a certain way in public and with others, and you live another way in private with God. That's kind of how it sounds. I am a Christian. I am nothing else. I'm a Christian. So if you see me at home, I'm a Christian. If you see me on the street, I am a Christian. Bottom line is, I must learn to humble myself. We talk about meekness as a fruit of the Spirit. I must humble myself and not think of myself more highly than I ought to think. I can't do nothing without God. No matter what, I can't do nothing without God. You can't do nothing without God. Be humble enough to give him credit for everything. Temperance. Now, this is another one that readily you might not really capture what it really is. Now, temperance. Now, in Jamaica, it's about somebody with a temper. It means that they are angry. I mean, they get angry easily. To throw a temper tantrum. Now, temperance. When it tempers something, it simply means that you regulate its operations. So, if something fluctuates between high and low, right? It fluctuates between high and low, and you want to temper it, it means that you kind of level it off, so it has a consistent flow. That's what it means to temper something, right? To make it sort of a steady flow, not a fluctuating flow, but a steady one. You temper it. What does that bring to mind? In other words, control yourself. You bring a level of control to the flow. So before you temper it, it was like, out of control. So to temper it, you bring it under control and give it a smooth flow and not a fluctuating one. So temperance is basically self-control. To control yourself. Self-control. Now, self-control, another way to phrase it is self-restraint. To restrain yourself from doing what you desire to do for a specific reason. So what you desire to do may not be the appropriate time or may not be the appropriate action. And so you temper your actions, you temper your emotions, you temper your intent. You control your desires, you temper your desires so that you can do what is appropriate at this time or what is right to be done at this time. Self-control. All right? So when I think of temperance, I think about self-control. Now, if we talk about the fruit of the Spirit, I like to also mention the works of the flesh, which I like to think of it as the fruit of the flesh. This is what the flesh produces. We just look at what the Spirit produces, what he produces. And these that he produces, these that the Spirit produces, these are what aids us in sanctification and being sanctified, living sanctified, living holy. These characteristics, these qualities, these behaviors is what aids us in living the sanctified life. This is how the Spirit gets us to live sanctified lives. All right? So these are the fruit of the Spirit. Now let's look at the works of the flesh. In Galatians 5 verse 20 to 21. Or verse 20 to 21. Well, I guess it's more than from verse 17. Let's go from 17 because this is verse 17 to verse 21. That's a little error again. All right? It should be 5:17 to 21 because these are, I think, about 4 verses. So let's go. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit,
and the spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that he cannot do the things that he would. But if he be led of the spirit, ye are not under the law. Whoa, a beautiful statement there, my friends. If you are led by the spirit, you are not under the law. The law is only for those who are lawbreakers, to get them in line or to keep them in check. A person who is led by the Spirit don't need no law. In other words, by the Spirit of God leading them, you don't need no law because the Spirit of God is leading you. And if you are led by Him, by virtue of Him leading you, you are going to obey all the law because He's the one who wrote the law. If I follow every instruction God give me, I can't be wrong. That's in essence what He's saying. So He's saying that the flesh lusteth against the Spirit. In other words, the flesh wars against the Spirit, and the Spirit wars against the flesh. They are contrary to one another. They can't combine. They can't come together. They can't reside in the same place. They are at war, constant war. So that you cannot do the things that you would. So if you are walking by the flesh, you cannot do the things that you want to do. Because you want to do the good, but you find yourself doing the bad. Because you're walking according to the flesh. You want to do the right thing, but you still find yourself doing the wrong thing. Because you're still walking according to the flesh. But it says, if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. It says, no, the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these. These are the works of the flesh: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. You cannot be with God with these things in your life. This is what the flesh produces: hatred. Now, if you want to live for God, you are going to have to learn to give up all these: idolatry, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness. If you are going to live for God, you're going to have to give up these. All of them. Not some of them, not a part of them, but every single one. And if you are led by the Spirit of God, you cannot manifest any of these. You cannot manifest any of these. Now, we as Jamaicans love to talk about bad mind, don't we? Covetousness. But do you know that covetousness didn't start in Jamaica? Covetousness didn't start in Jamaica. Bad mind not started in Jamaica. And the thing is, sometimes we tend to think that this bad mind issue is only in Jamaica. Because I've heard people say, boy, it's only your side there, because when I go other places, I don't see it. Well, too bad. Maybe because the other place that you have been, you are a newcomer, so you wouldn't see it so readily. Go live there for a couple of years, and you may find it. Because this bad mind thing started from back in Genesis, when Cain killed Abel. A bad mind why Cain killed Abel. In bad mind, the man for him gift when he to God. Because Fim gift was rejected, but Abel's gift was accepted. So in bad mind Abel. A friend says start, man. Covetousness is coming from way back then. Nothing new. But if you are led by the Spirit of God, you won't manifest any such things in your life. No covetousness, no bad mind. None of those things. So, if we're going to live by the Spirit, it means we have to surrender to what He wants us to do. It means that when the Spirit of God says run, we run. When He says come, we come. When He says go to that place, we go. When He says take out the money you put on your drawer, can't give Sister Jane. You go and take to and oh, Sister Jane and ask a question because he dictates to you what to do. When he says to you, the money you have in your pocket, give all of it as offering. I said, no, I'm afraid I got work this week. If he says that to you, would you give it? Of course. You should. If the Spirit of God tells you to do it, then do it. Because he is leading you. And the Bible says he will lead you into all truth. What the problem is? We sometimes think we know the truth better than the Spirit of God. Because when the Spirit of God compels us to do something, we tell God no. We literally tell God no. Because we think that we know the truth more than God does. But to be led by the Spirit of God, it means you have to be willing to do whatever he asks you to do. All right? Now that's another one in the revelings, which sometimes we don't really get it. When you see this reveling that's going, when you hear reveling, what do you think of? Well, when I hear it, I think about carnival. And that's what it is. You're reveling in your own self and selfish fleshly things. And that's something that we have to be careful of. All of these things, get them out of your system. Strife. Strife is one that sometimes gets in among us easily because we don't see it as grave. For the sake of peace, can you refuse to let your thinking be known? For the sake of peace, can you not stand up for your right? Because a lot of times, we say, boy, may I stand up for my right? May I defend my right? For the sake of peace, can you not defend your right? You have a right to it, But for the sake of peace, you're laying it aside. You're not demanding it. Because it's looking like you have to strive to get it. And you don't like strife. You don't like the fighting and the backbiting and the kicking and all that. You don't like that. You stay away from that for the sake of peace. That's what the Spirit of God is going to help you to do. He's going to help you to avoid all of these. This seemingly endless list. He will help you to avoid them. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at the life of Jesus. And this is something I would love for you all to take on. To look at the life of Jesus. Go through the Gospels. Yes, man, go through the Gospels. And I want you to look at the life of Jesus and identify in his life how he exemplified the fruits of the Spirit. Identify some examples in Jesus' life where he demonstrated the fruit of the Spirit. Remember what the fruit of the Spirit are? Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, meekness, temperance, faith. Those. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. These. Look for occasions throughout the life of Christ where he exemplified these traits. I'll give you an example. Well, throughout his life, he manifested the fruit of the Spirit. So I'm going to give you an example of that. At his temptation, he exemplified what? Self-restraint. At his temptation. How did he do that? The devil came to him and he said to him, command these stones to be made bread. He was just coming off 40 days of fasting. Not having eaten anything. The Bible says he was hungry. And he's not hungry, he was hungered. Extremities of hunger. 40 days of hunger. Hungry after 40 days of not eating anything. The devil says, command these stones to be made bread. He exercised self-restraint in that he restrained himself. Even though he was hungry, he restrained himself. He restrained that hunger drive to do the right thing. You see, the devil says, if you are the Son of God, the temptation was not to turn stones to bread. The temptation was to prove that you are the Son of God. Sounds familiar? Prove that you are the Son of God. The only time you will set out to prove something is because you doubt its genuineness. That's the only time you set out to prove something. When you doubt whether it's genuine or not, that's the only time you will set out to prove something. So anytime you're about to prove something to anybody, it's because you doubt its genuineness. If someone else doubt it, you don't need to prove it. They need to go prove it. So a lot of times people come and they send a WhatsApp message. Oh, if you love Jesus, send this to 12 people. Or if you love God, send this to 10 of your friends. Now, when I get these messages, and I start to read and I see it look like it's one of them, I just stop reading, scroll to the bottom, and look what it says. If it ever say anything like, if you are a Christian, or if you love God, or if you're a child of God, once it says that, delete. Sorry, but I don't read those messages. Neither do I send them. I see them as no different from what the devil said to Jesus. If you are the Son of God, command these stones to be made bread. That's how cunning and crafty the devil is. He coined it in such a way that it looked like nothing. It almost looked like it is in favor of God. But it's not. What's more, if you see, when you go on 40 days of fast, I learned this the other day from Bernard Blessing when he was giving his testimony. I listened to him and he also shared about fasting and prayer. So I was listening to him one of these days and he spoke about the 40-day fast and how to fast and all of that. One of the things he mentioned is that if you come off a 40-day fasting and when you come off you go eat bread, you're a dead man. I didn't know that. But he shared that. Now, it means that if Christ had turned those stones to bread and ate those bread, he'd be dead. So the devil was not just asking to prove that he's the Son of God. He was asking to do that and also giving him something that would kill him. So if Jesus was not smart enough and wise enough to rely on the word of God, well, don't even want to mention that. So what is temptation? Christ exemplified self-restraint. In the list of the fruit of the Spirit, that's temperance. Give another one. Christ exhibited humility throughout his ministry. An example of him being humble is when, before, in the final week of his life with the disciples, before he went to the cross, he got his disciples together and they were in the upper room. And he got a basin of water. He girded himself with a towel, tied a towel around his waist. And he sat down, knelt down, or he stooped in front of his disciples and he began washing their feet and drying it with the towel. That's humility. Imagine this. The symbolism of this, is a teach an object lesson of humility. So here is the master, the teacher, the Christ himself, stooping down, washing his disciples' feet. Normally, it's the other way around. When the master comes to the house, a disciple will wash his feet. That's how it naturally is. The master don't wash the disciples' feet. The disciples would have washed the master's feet. But Jesus washed his disciples' feet. That was an example of him being humble. That was an example of humility. And Christ was showing himself humble. Christ was showing himself as that symbol of humility. So friends, in the list of the fruits of the Spirit, that's the fruit of meekness. Meekness. All right? So, as we have looked at tonight the Spirit's role in sanctification, we have seen that his role is manifested in the fruits of the Spirit. That is how we can understand his role when we look at the fruit of the Spirit, because he produces these qualities in us. And the production of these qualities in us, that is the work of sanctification. Sanctification is where we become more like Christ. We are sanctified, but then we must live holy. The holy lifestyle or living holy is achieved through the Spirit of God as he develop within us the fruits of the Spirit. As he within us cultivate that Christ-likeness in us. That is how we bear out this whole aspect or this whole work of sanctification. Bless God. So tonight, I would love for us to understand that as believers, God expects us to live holy. God expects us to live different from the way the world lives. To give you an example of how this works out, in Genesis, God said to Adam and Eve that of every herb and fruit-bearing tree with the seed in it, I give you for food. Then when Noah and his sons came out of the ark, God said to them, every creeping thing or every moving thing upon the face of the earth, I give you for meat. That's what God said to Noah. Every moving thing with life in it, I give you for food. The only thing he says, make sure you don't eat it with the blood in it. That's what God said to Noah and his sons. So God says, everything that moves upon the face of the earth with life in it, I give you for food. You look at the first instance, it's herbs and fruits. Second instance, he says, everything that moves and have life in it is food. But then it came to him now calling out Israel as a nation to himself. He sanctified Israel as a nation to be used for his glory. He said to Israel, only animals of a particular kind you are going to be able to eat. Don't eat any animal. When it comes to cattle, eat the ones that part their hoof and chew their cud. So he specifies to them the kind of meat that they would eat. So he separated them out and then he prescribed a diet for them. In other words, God calls out Israel, but then he designed a lifestyle for them. In the same way, friends, God calls us out from among the world, from among the peoples of this world. He called us out, separated us, sanctified us, and he prescribed a lifestyle for us. That lifestyle is life by the Spirit, living by the Spirit of God, where his fruit that he produces in us brings about these behaviors in our lives. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. He produces these in our lives so that we can be seen as God's children. Tonight, what are you living by? Are you living by your own desires or what you want? Or are you living by the Spirit of God? You cannot want to live for God and live the way you want. Oh, it's fashionable. I like the way it looks. You are not your own. You can't wear it because you like how it looks. You ought to wear it because the Spirit of God tells you to wear it. You ought to be that way because the Spirit of God leads you to be that way. That's the quality and kind of life that we need to live. If you're going to live the sanctified life, you have to live by the dictates of the Spirit. You can't dress the way you want. You can't eat the way you want. You can't do the things you want. You dress the way the Spirit wants you to, eat what the Spirit wants you, and you be the way the Spirit wants you. That's what it means, to be led by the Spirit of God. Jesus being your Lord means that he rules over you. That's what Lord means, to rule over. So if you say that Jesus is your Lord, it means that Jesus rules over your life. He has a control of your life. So you don't live the way you please. Sometimes Christians would approach another Christian and say, boy, the way that you behave, it offends me, And the response that they would get is, oh, I'm sorry. I don't have a problem with it. You have a problem, your business done. That's the way the world will behave, not the way Christians should. So we can't pick that up and try and behave like that. We are supposed to be set apart. That's the way the world behave. We are set apart, so we don't behave the way the world behave. We behave differently. We behave ourselves differently. We are not our own. We are bought with a price. Therefore, we glorify God in our members. My hands glorify God. My mouth glorify God, my eyes glorify God, my ears glorify God, my feet glorify God. I glorify God in my members. My mind glorify God. If we should open the door or the window into your heart and your mind, what will we find? Will we find that it's not in a condition that God gets glory? Or will we find that it's in a condition where God gets glory out of it? Let's be careful to follow the Spirit of God and walk by Him, because it is by Him that we are sanctified, and it is by Him that we are holy. Bless the Lord. So sanctified would refer to the work or the acts of separating. Holy refers to the state of being separated. Understand the difference? Any question? Any question? If you have any questions, shoot it across in the comments below. All right? If you have any questions, shoot it across so that I can give you an answer before I close off. Any questions out there? Hallelujah. I hope you catch the mistakes I corrected as I was presenting in the scripture references. All right? Hallelujah. Waiting to see if I get any questions in the comments. If there's no question, I want to say thanks for those of you who are on. I'm able to see a few of the names of the persons who are on. Some of my regulars are here, always here. Sister Jennifer, never miss a night. And Sister Maury, never miss a night. Sister Richards, I know you don't miss a night. Never miss a night. Who else is my never miss a night crew now? But let's see who else is here on my list. Oh, I see the Whitfield sisters are here as well. Welcome. Welcome to you both. Brother Lawrence, Brother Rose, I see your answer from all the way over there in Canada. It's good to have you on. All right. Hey. Oh, someone is asking what those irises mean. Irise, you know, as Jamaica we say irise. Yeah, take irise. All right, so it's irises. Now, irises is basically referring to false teachings. So, false teachings about God or anything. So, irises is basically false teachings that are not the teachings of Christ. So, someone will come to you and say, "Boy, this is it," but that's false teaching because that's not what Christ teach. All right, so irises is false teachings. Okay, there are a lot of persons who I expected to be on tonight. I'm not seeing some of those names in the comment section, and I'm going to assume that they are not commenting. But it's good to have you all on tonight, and I look forward to sharing with you again on Sunday at 11. In light of the many changes the government has made, we still go on doing what we have to do within the confines of those directives and laws that they have enacted. And on Sunday, we'll be having a baptism again on Sunday. And as always, oh yeah, one of my always present, Sister Prendergast. Welcome, lady love. All right, so on Sunday, we're having a baptism, and it's one person baptizing on Sunday. And so we would love to have some persons present. My crew, they know themselves. The persons who were there with me the last time. I'm going to be extending that same invitation to those persons as well. So those persons who were here the last time, I'm going to extend invitation to some of you. I know that the number will be, it's a few, so I'll extend invitation to some other persons as well, because last time we had, I think, 2 candidates and also 2 other persons who came with the candidates, so that's 4 persons. This time around, those persons will not be the ones that are coming. We have 1 candidate, and I assume that we're going to have 1 person with the candidate. And so that means that we have space for 2 more persons. And so I'm going to send an invitation out to 2 other persons to join us in baptism on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. So we normally do baptism after I share the message here. Once my message is done, then we head down to church, we'll do the baptism, and that's it. So we're doing another baptism on Sunday. I look forward to seeing those of you who will be there. and we were not able to stream live. You must scream. We were not able to stream live last time, but I'm hoping that this time around be able to stream live because we had some issues with the devices. So we're going to do a test run and see if it can work. If it can't work, then we find another way to. We'll record it and then put it up after. But we're going to do a test run, the live streaming, and see if we can get it working. If we can't, then we have to do a post after it is done. All right. I see one more of my always on sister Car. Welcome to you, dear sister. I know you're always on with us. There are a lot more persons who are always on, but don't hold it against what I'm calling him. All right. It's just the names I'm seeing on the list there that I'm calling on. All right. So if you haven't made a comment, I acknowledge you that you're always here. All right. So bless God for having you, and bless God for you being here. All right. All right, I'm just looking to see if there's any more questions. And I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, Brother Brown, you and your wife. Welcome, sir. All right, it was good to have you on. Uh, bless you for that observation, Sister Shanique, Sister Edwards. That observation was keen. I just read your comment there. Good one, all right? All right, so there be no questions. I'm going to bring everything to a close here now. And it was very good to have you here with us tonight. And I hope that you will take that step of employing these this fruit of the Spirit in your life, or the Spirit working in you, so that you can manifest these fruits of the Spirit. All right, these different behaviors and stuff that we consider to be real exemplary. All of them, get to know them, and surrender yourself to the Spirit of God, so that you are able to live for God as you should. Oh, someone is asking what is variances. Oh, that's found in the works of the flesh. All right. Variance. I did not really look up that one, but let me tell you something. I'm going to explain. I'm going to do an explanation of that next week. All right, because all right. So variance is one of the fruits, one of the works of the flesh. But offhand, right now, I'm not able to say that to you as to what it is, because I did not go through that list to look at what they are in detail. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do an explanation of that next week. All right. Because I don't want to tell you what I think and then it's not the thing. All right. So forgive me on that. I don't want to tell you what I think and it's not. So give me a chance to really look back at it, and then I can tell you what that is. Fair enough? All right, sis. So next week I'll do that for you. Hallelujah. All right. So that's that for tonight. Thank you all for being here. I'll just pray the closing prayer, and then we call it a night. And as always, we continue to reach out to each other via our various means to keep in touch, stay in touch, and touch base with each other as we go on. Because again, we don't meet together at church, so we still have to keep in touch to keep in touch with each other and touch each other through the various means that we have of reaching out to each other. All right, let's pray. Loving Father, our God and our Lord, it is by you that we live and move and have our being. We have no other but you. We worship no other but you, God, because you are our defense. You are our Lord. You are our master. You are our friend because you called us friend. And so, Father, tonight, as we have heard of your word, as we have received of your spirit and a word from your heart, I pray, God, that you'll continue by your spirit to water that word in us, so that it will grow and develop and bear and produce fruits in our lives. So that, God, our lives will bring you glory, our lives will bring you honor, that in all things that we do, it will be an offering of praise to you. Lord, I pray tonight that for all who are gathered here, who are here sharing in this moment and listening into your words and sharing in your words, I pray, God, that you'll cause that their hearts will be so saturated, Father, by your Spirit, that as He ministers to them and to their hearts, their lives will become an outflow, O God, of you in this earth. That others will see and know that you are God and that you must be worshipped. That by their lives they'll know that there is a God and He must be worshipped. We give you thanks and we give you praise tonight as we glorify you in Jesus' name. Amen. Hallelujah. Let's see. So, enjoy the rest of your night, and we see each other again on Sunday. Have a good night. Blessings.